Most people would have run away the moment they looked up. Emma Carter took one step closer. The early morning air carried the crisp scent of pine and damp earth as 8-year-old Emma wandered deeper into the woods behind her grandmother's farmhouse. A thin blanket of fog drifted between the towering trees, turning familiar trails into a world that felt mysterious and new. Her small rubber boots crunched softly over fallen pine needles while a canvas bag bounced against her side, already half full of pine cones she planned to use for a school project. Saturday mornings were her favorite. No homework, no chores, just endless woods stretching beyond the old fence line and the freedom to explore. Emma paused beside a narrow creek, watching sunlight shimmer across the moving water. Somewhere overhead, a woodpecker tapped rhythmically against a tree trunk. Everything felt peaceful, safe, ordinary. Then she heard it, a sound so faint she almost missed it, a low groan drifting through the forest. Emma froze. The noise came again, weak, strange, almost like an injured animal calling for help. Her grandmother had always warned her not to wander too far whenever she heard unusual sounds in the woods. But Emma had inherited something stronger than caution. Curiosity. She adjusted the strap of her bag and slowly followed the sound deeper into the trees. The forest seemed quieter with every step. Even the birds had gone silent. The groaning returned, slightly louder this time. Emma stepped around a fallen log and squeezed between two massive pine trees. What she saw next made her stop, so suddenly that her bag slipped from her shoulder and landed in the dirt. For several seconds, she simply stared. High above the forest floor, suspended from a thick oak branch nearly 20 feet overhead, hung a man. Upside down. Emma blinked hard, convinced her eyes were playing tricks on her. But the figure remained there, swaying gently in the morning breeze. One boot was tangled in a rope looped over the branch while the rest of his body hung awkwardly beneath it. A black leather vest dangled toward the ground. Sunlight reflected from silver patches stitched across the back. The man looked enormous. Broad shoulders, gray beard, weathered face. The kind of stranger most children would immediately run from. Yet something about him didn't feel dangerous. He looked exhausted. His eyes were closed. His arms hung limply toward the ground. For one terrifying moment, Emma wondered if he was even alive. Then she heard another groan. The man shifted slightly. Relief flooded through her. "Mister," she called cautiously. No answer. Emma took a few steps closer. "Mister, can you hear me?" This time the man's eyelids fluttered. Slowly, painfully, he opened his eyes. They were pale blue and unfocused at first. Then they found Emma standing below. Confusion crossed his face, followed by disbelief. "Kid," he muttered hoarsely. Emma had expected fear, maybe anger. Instead, she heard exhaustion. The man looked less like a threat and more like someone who desperately needed help. "Are you stuck?" she asked. The question sounded ridiculous the moment it left her mouth. The man let out a faint breath that might have been a laugh. "You could say that." Emma studied the situation carefully. The rope held tight around the branch. The ground beneath him was covered in roots and rocks. There was no ladder, no nearby cabin, no obvious explanation for how a giant man had ended up hanging upside down in the middle of nowhere. "I'm Emma," she said. "My grandma says introducing yourself is polite." The man's expression softened slightly. "Marcus." His voice sounded strained. "Marcus Steele." Emma nodded. "Well, Marcus Steele, you don't look very comfortable." Another faint smile appeared despite his situation. For a brief moment, he seemed amused by her honesty. Then a shadow crossed his face. His eyes shifted towards something deeper in the woods. Something Emma couldn't see. The smile vanished instantly. Concern replaced it. Fear even. Marcus looked back at her. His voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Emma," she stepped closer. "Yeah." The giant biker swallowed hard and glanced once more toward the trees behind her. When he spoke again, his words sent a chill through the quiet forest. "Kid," he paused, his eyes widening slightly. "Run." Emma's heart pounded so hard she could hear it over the whispering wind. "Run." The word echoed through her mind as she stared up at Marcus Steele hanging from the oak branch. Most children would have done exactly what he said. Most children would have turned around and raced back towards safety without asking a single question. But Emma Carter had never been like most children. She glanced over her shoulder. The woods behind her were still and quiet. Shafts of sunlight filtered through the tall pines, painting golden streaks across the forest floor. Nothing moved. No footsteps. No voices. No sign of whatever had frightened the giant biker. When she looked back up, Marcus seemed weaker than before. His face had grown pale beneath his gray beard, and the strain of hanging upside down was obvious. "I do not see anybody," Emma said. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment as if gathering strength. "That does not mean they are not here." Emma followed his gaze into the trees. She wanted to be afraid. She knew she probably should have been afraid. Her grandmother had warned her countless times about strangers. The people in town had warned each other about biker gangs for as long as Emma could remember. Whenever motorcycles rumbled through town, curtains shifted and conversation stopped. Yet the man above her did not look frightening. He looked tired, lost, human. "You need help?" she said simply. Marcus let out a slow breath. "Kid, helping me might get complicated." Emma frowned. Adults always said things like that. Complicated usually meant they did not want to explain something. "My grandma says if someone is hurt, you help them first and ask questions later." For the first time since she had found him, a genuine smile touched Marcus's face. It was small, but changed him completely. The rough features softened. The hard edges disappeared. He looked less like the intimidating biker people feared and more like somebody's grandfather. "Sounds like your grandma is smarter than most people." Emma smiled back. Then she noticed a patch on his leather vest. A winged skull surrounded by lettering she recognized from conversations she was never supposed to hear. Her smile faded. Even at 8 years old, she knew what the symbol meant. The adults in town always spoke about Hell's Angels in hushed voices. Some spoke with fear, others with suspicion. None of them ever spoke kindly. Emma looked from the patch to Marcus's tired eyes. Nothing matched the stories. "Are you really one of them?" she asked. Marcus knew exactly what she meant. He glanced at the patch and nodded once. "I am." Emma studied him carefully. "You do not seem scary." A faint chuckle escaped him. "A lot of people would disagree with you. Well, they're not hanging upside down in a tree right now." Marcus laughed despite himself. The sound seemed to surprise even him. For a brief moment, the tension hanging over the forest lifted. Then his expression changed again. He winced slightly and shifted his shoulders. Emma realized he was struggling to stay conscious. Suddenly the situation felt much more serious. "Do not fall asleep," she said quickly. "I'm not planning to." "Good." Emma looked around, searching for a solution. The rope was too high. The branch was too thick. She could not possibly free him herself. But she could do something else. She unscrewed the cap from the water bottle sticking out of her bag and carefully held it upward. "Can you reach this?" Marcus stretched one hand and managed to grasp it. "Thank you." He took a small sip before handing it back. "You are not afraid of me at all, are you?" Emma thought about the question. "I think you are afraid for me," she answered. "That feels different." Marcus stared at her, speechless. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called from the treetops. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Then Emma made up her mind. She reached in her pocket and pulled out the small flip phone her grandmother insisted she carry whenever she wandered the woods. Marcus immediately understood what she was about to do. "Emma." She flipped the phone open. "You need help. The police might ask questions. Then you can answer them later." Her fingers moved across the keypad. "Right now I'm calling 911. As the phone began to ring, Marcus looked down at the brave little girl standing beneath him and realized she had already made a choice no warning could change. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each second felt heavier than the last. Emma stood beneath the towering oak with the flip phone pressed tightly against her ear, while Marcus remained suspended above her, watching the tree line as though he expected something to emerge from the shadows at any moment. Finally, a calm voice answered. 911. What is your emergency? Relief washed over Emma. Please help me. There's a man stuck in a tree. A brief pause followed. A man is stuck in a tree, the dispatcher repeated. Yes, ma'am. Emma glanced upward. He is hanging upside down. Another silence. Longer this time. Sweetheart, what is your name? Emma Carter. Okay, Emma, can you tell me where you are? Emma quickly described the forest trail behind her grandmother's property, giving every landmark she could remember. The dispatcher listened carefully, but Emma could hear uncertainty in the woman's voice. The story sounded ridiculous even to her own ears. A giant biker hanging upside down from a tree deep in the woods was not the sort of emergency people reported every day. Emma, are you sure this is not a prank? The dispatcher asked gently. Emma's eyes widened. No, ma'am. He is really here. Can you describe him? Emma looked up at Marcus. His leather vest shifted slightly in the breeze. He has a gray beard. He is very big. He is wearing a biker vest. Another pause. Is he injured? Emma hesitated. She did not know how to answer. Marcus looked exhausted, but she could not see any obvious injuries. He looks very tired. The dispatcher exhaled slowly. Can I speak to the adult? Emma held the phone higher. Marcus gave a small shake of his head. Ma'am, Emma said, he cannot really move very well. The dispatcher sounded unconvinced. Emma, stay on the line with me. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. They do not believe you. They will. Most people stop listening when something sounds impossible. Emma frowned. She did not like that answer. The dispatcher returned. Emma, deputies are checking the area, but may take some time. I need you to move to a safe location. I'm staying here. Sweetheart, if this man is a stranger, you should keep your distance. Emma looked up at Marcus again. He looked less like a stranger now than he had 10 minutes earlier. He needs help. Help is on the way. What if it takes too long? The question caught the dispatcher off guard. Emma's voice trembled for the first time. What if nobody gets here in time? Marcus slowly opened his eyes and looked down at her. The forest had become strangely quiet again. Even the wind seemed to have disappeared. Emma, the dispatcher began carefully. The deputies are coming. But what if they think I made it up? Emma asked. What if they leave? Her throat tightened. She hated crying, especially in front of strangers, but the fear suddenly felt too large to hold inside. If nobody comes, she whispered, he will die. The words hung in the air. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the dispatcher's tone changed completely. The doubt vanished. Professional concern replaced it. Listen to me, Emma. I need you to stay exactly where you are. Do not leave him alone. Units are being redirected right now. Emma nodded, even though the woman could not see her. Okay. And Emma? Yes. You did the right thing by calling. Tears formed in Emma's eyes, but this time they came from relief. Above her, Marcus watched the little girl standing beneath the tree and realized something he had not expected. For the first time all morning, he was no longer worried about himself. He was worried about her. Then, far in the distance, barely audible through the forest, came the faint sound of approaching sirens. The distant sirens grew slightly louder, weaving through the stillness of the forest like a promise carried on the wind. Emma felt a small wave of relief, but Marcus did not. The giant biker remained unusually tense, his pale blue eyes fixed somewhere beyond the trees. It was as if he was listening for something other than approaching rescue vehicles. Emma noticed it immediately. You keep looking over there, she said quietly. Marcus lowered his gaze toward her. For a moment, he seemed unsure whether to answer. The morning sunlight filtered through the oak leaves above him, casting shifting patterns across his weathered face. Sometimes trouble does not leave when you think it has, he finally said. Emma frowned. Adults always spoke in puzzles when they were worried. What kind of trouble? Marcus hesitated again. The sirens echoed faintly in the distance. He seemed to be measuring time, calculating something. Then he let out a slow breath. Emma, I need you to listen carefully. The seriousness in his voice made her straighten immediately. Okay. Marcus glanced toward the forest one more time before returning his attention to the little girl standing beneath him. What I am about to tell you cannot leave this clearing. Not yet. Emma nodded. I promise. The words came naturally. She did not know why, but she trusted him. Marcus studied her face for several seconds, as if deciding whether an 8-year-old could carry a secret. Finally, he spoke. I'm not up here because of an accident. Emma's eyes widened. She had assumed he had fallen while climbing or become tangled somehow. The idea that something else had happened never crossed her mind. Then how did you get there? Marcus looked away briefly. Some people wanted me out of the way. Emma's stomach tightened. Why? His jaw shifted slightly. Because I learned something they did not want anyone to know. The answer only created more questions. Emma glanced around the quiet forest. Everything suddenly felt different. The trees seemed taller. The shadows seemed darker. The world no longer felt like a place where people simply got lost during morning walks. Who are they? She whispered. Marcus shook his head. The less you know right now, the safer you are. Emma did not like that answer either. Are they bad people? Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a heaviness she had not heard before. There are people who are afraid of the truth. A gust of wind swept through the clearing, scattering leaves across the forest floor. Emma watched them spin through the sunlight. What truth? Marcus closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, something had changed. The exhaustion was still there, but beneath it was determination. There are things happening that should not be happening. People are being hurt by lies. Emma waited. Marcus seemed to be choosing every word carefully. I found proof. Proof of what? Marcus lowered his voice until it was barely above a whisper. That is the problem. I never got the chance to show anyone. The sound of sirens was noticeably closer now. Emma could tell rescue crews were approaching the forest road. Marcus heard it too. He glanced toward the sound, then back at her. Suddenly his expression sharpened. If anything happens, he said quietly, remember one thing. Emma stepped closer. What? Marcus swallowed hard. They wanted me silent. The words seemed to settle into the air around them. Emma felt a chill despite the growing warmth of the morning sun. Before she could ask another question, distant voices echoed through the woods. Search teams were finally getting close. Relief should have filled the clearing. Instead, Marcus looked more concerned than ever. And for the first time since finding him, Emma began to wonder what secret could make a grown man fear being rescued almost as much as being found. The first rescue worker appeared between the trees less than 2 minutes later, followed by 2 sheriff's deputies and a paramedic carrying a bright orange medical bag. Their voices echoed through the forest as they pushed through the undergrowth toward the clearing. Emma stepped back while the adults immediately focused on Marcus. Questions filled the air. Instructions followed. Equipment was unpacked. For the first time all morning, the giant biker seemed willing to relax. The arrival of help should have brought comfort, yet Emma noticed something strange. Marcus never stopped watching the faces around him. He studied every newcomer carefully, almost as if he expected to recognize someone. The paramedics worked quickly, checking his condition and discussing the safest way to bring him down. One deputy knelt beside Emma. Are you Emma Carter? She nodded. You are the one who called? Yes, sir. The deputy smiled warmly. You did a brave thing today. Emma glanced toward Marcus. The biker gave her a small nod of appreciation before the rescue team shifted their attention back to him. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of activity. Ropes were secured. Instructions were exchanged. The clearing that had felt so isolated earlier now buzzed with movement. Sunlight had climbed higher above the treetops, burning away most of the morning fog. Eventually the team safely brought Marcus back to the ground. Emma felt a surprising wave of relief when she saw him standing again, even if he looked exhausted. Up close, he seemed even larger than before. One of the paramedics draped a blanket over his shoulders and guided him toward a waiting utility vehicle parked near the trail. Looks like you're going to be okay, Emma said. Marcus managed a tired smile. Thanks to you. The words made her grin. Before she could respond, another deputy approached and began asking Marcus questions. The biker answered carefully, offering only short responses. Emma remembered his warning. They wanted me silent. The sentence lingered in her mind. As the rescue team prepared to leave, Marcus suddenly turned his head and searched the crowd until he found her. For a brief moment their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, concern, maybe both. Then he was escorted toward the vehicle. Emma watched as the group slowly disappeared down the trail. The forest grew quiet once more. The excitement was over. The mystery should have been over too. She bent down to retrieve her canvas bag from the ground where she had dropped it earlier. That was when she noticed something, glinting in the sunlight. A small metallic object rested among the fallen leaves near the base of the oak tree. Emma frowned and knelt beside it. It looked old, much older than any key she had ever seen. The metal was darkened with age, and its handle carried an unusual design that resembled intertwined branches. Attached to it by a faded leather cord was a tiny folded piece of paper. Emma glanced toward the trail. Nobody seemed to have noticed. Curiosity got the better of her. She carefully unfolded the note. Written across it in neat handwriting was a sequence of numbers followed by what looked like map coordinates. She did not understand them, but she immediately knew one thing. This belonged to Marcus. Her heart began to race. Had it fallen from his pocket while the rescue team helped him? She looked down the trail again. The vehicles were already gone. For several seconds, she considered handing the key to the sheriff's department later. That would be the responsible thing to do. Yet something stopped her. She remembered Marcus's expression when he spoke about secrets. She remembered the fear in his eyes when he looked into the forest. Most of all, she remembered his words. They wanted me silent. Emma slowly closed her hand around the key. The cool metal pressed against her palm. Whatever this was, it felt important. Very important. She slipped the key and folded note into her jacket pocket and stood up. Above her, the old oak tree swayed gently in the breeze. The clearing looked ordinary again, but Emma had the unmistakable feeling that her day had only just begun. The Carter farmhouse sat at the edge of town where the forest met rolling fields of late summer grass. By the time Emma returned home, the sun had begun its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of gold and orange. Her grandmother, Rose Carter, listened carefully as Emma described the strange morning in the woods. She spoke about the rescue team, the giant biker, and the hours that followed. The only thing she did not mention was the old key resting quietly inside her jacket pocket. Something about it felt too important to share. That evening passed peacefully enough. Rose prepared chicken soup. Emma finished her school project at the kitchen table. The familiar sounds of country life filled the house. Crickets chirped outside. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the hallway. For a while, it almost felt like the strange events in the forest belonged to another world entirely. Then darkness settled over the countryside. Around 8:30, Emma stood at the living room window watching fireflies drift across the yard. Their tiny lights blinked like floating stars above the grass. That was when she noticed headlights approaching the farmhouse. A dark pickup truck rolled slowly down the gravel road before stopping near the mailbox. Emma frowned. Visitors were unusual this late in the evening. Two men stepped out. Both wore work jackets and baseball caps pulled low over their faces. There was nothing obviously threatening about them, yet something immediately felt wrong. They did not look like neighbors. They did not look lost. They looked like they were searching for something. "Grandma," Emma called softly. Rose looked up from her knitting chair. "What is it, sweetheart?" "Somebody is here." Rose walked to the window and peered outside. The two men were already approaching the porch. A moment later, the doorbell rang. Rose opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The taller man smiled politely. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. We are looking into an incident that happened near the woods this morning." Emma froze. The man continued. "We heard a little girl found someone out there." Rose nodded slowly. "My granddaughter did. Would it be all right if we asked her a few questions?" Something in the way he spoke made Emma uneasy. His words sounded friendly enough, but his eyes never seemed to smile. Rose hesitated. "What kind of questions?" The shorter man stepped forward. "Nothing serious. We're simply trying to locate an item that may have gone missing." Emma's pulse quickened. Instinctively, her hand drifted toward the pocket where the old key remained hidden. The taller man glanced past Rose and spotted Emma standing in the hallway. "Hi there," he said warmly. "You were in the woods today, right?" Emma nodded without speaking. "Did you happen to find anything unusual near that tree?" The question hit her like a bolt of lightning. Suddenly the room felt smaller. The key seemed heavier in her pocket. Rose frowned. What exactly are you looking for? The men exchanged a quick glance. It lasted less than a second, but Emma noticed it. Just a personal belonging, the taller. Munn replied, something our friend may have dropped. Friend. The word sounded rehearsed. Emma remembered Marcus's warning. They wanted me silent. Her stomach tightened. These men knew about the tree. They knew about the missing item. Most importantly, they knew enough to come searching for it. Rose politely ended the conversation a few minutes later. The visitors thanked her and returned to their truck. Emma watched through the curtains as the vehicle disappeared down the road. Neither she nor her grandmother spoke for several moments. Finally, Rose turned toward her. Something about that felt strange. Emma swallowed hard. I know. Later that night, long after Rose had gone to bed, Emma sat alone in her room beneath the glow of a small reading lamp. The old key rested in her hands. Beside it lay the folded note with the mysterious coordinates. Outside her bedroom window, the countryside remained silent. But Emma no longer believed the story had ended in the forest. In fact, she was beginning to realize it had only just begun. Emma barely slept that night. The old key sat on her bedside table beside the folded note, catching the moonlight that filtered through her curtains. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the two men standing on her porch asking questions they already seemed to know the answers to. By sunrise, she had made up her mind. She was going to find out what the coordinates meant. The next morning, she carried the note downstairs and showed it to her grandmother while they ate breakfast. Rose adjusted her reading glasses and studied the numbers carefully. These look like map coordinates, she said. Emma tried to sound casual. Could we see where they lead? Rose raised an eyebrow. This has something to do with yesterday, does it not? Emma hesitated before nodding. To her surprise, Rose did not seem angry. Instead, she looked thoughtful. If those men came all the way out here asking about a missing item, then I would rather know what is going on than sit around wondering. Less than an hour later, they were driving along a narrow county road that wound through the hills north of town. Rose used an old paper map while Emma compared the coordinates. The farther they traveled, the fewer houses they saw. Eventually, the paved road became gravel. The gravel became dirt. Towering pines crowded both sides of the path until the forest swallowed them completely. The coordinates are close, Rose said quietly. Emma felt excitement and nervousness twisting together inside her stomach. After another half-mile, they reached a rusted gate hanging crooked between two weathered fence posts. Beyond it stood an abandoned cabin hidden among the trees. The structure looked forgotten by time itself. Its roof sagged slightly. Moss covered parts of the walls. Tall grass surrounded the porch. Nobody has lived here in years, Rose murmured. Emma climbed out of the truck and stared at the cabin. Something about it felt important. The place carried the strange silence of a location holding secrets. They approached carefully. The front door was locked. Every window was dusty. Yet the coordinates pointed directly to this spot. Emma pulled the old key from her pocket. Rose's eyes widened. Emma Carter, is that the missing item? Emma nodded sheepishly. Rose sighed but said nothing. Together, they searched the property. Behind the cabin, they found an old storm cellar partially hidden beneath vines and fallen branches. A heavy metal door sat flush with the ground. Emma's pulse quickened. The lock attached to the door looked ancient. More importantly, it matched the shape of the key perfectly. No way, Emma whispered. Rose looked equally surprised. Emma inserted the key. For a second, nothing happened. Then the lock clicked open. The sound echoed through the quiet forest. Slowly, they lifted the door. A set of wooden stairs descended into darkness below. Cool air drifted upward, carrying the scent of dust and old paper. Rose switched on a flashlight from her truck and carefully led the way down. At the bottom, they discovered a hidden room far larger than either expected. Metal shelves lined the walls. Cardboard boxes filled the corners. A folding table stood in the center beneath a hanging work light. Emma moved closer. Photographs covered one wall. Maps covered another. Files sat stacked in neat rows. Everything looked organized, deliberate, important. Rose picked up a folder and opened it. Her expression changed instantly. "Oh my goodness." Emma stepped beside her. The documents contained records, photographs, business reports, and handwritten notes connecting multiple properties around the county. One name appeared again and again. Trent Holloway. Emma recognized it immediately. Holloway owned the largest lumber operation in the region and was one of the most respected businessmen in town. Yet the papers suggested something very different. Marcus had been collecting evidence for months. Detailed notes described unsafe housing conditions for seasonal workers, missing payroll funds, and attempts to hide violations from inspectors. More importantly, the files contained proof. Receipts, statements, photographs, records. Enough evidence to expose everything. Emma suddenly understood why Marcus had looked so worried in the forest. She understood why someone might want this information hidden. Then Rose's flashlight stopped on a final photograph pinned near the back wall. Both of them froze. The image showed Marcus standing beside this very cabin only a week earlier. Written beneath it in black marker were 4 chilling words. "If found, trust Emma." Rose lowered the photograph slowly, her hands trembling. Emma stared at the message beneath it, unable to look away. "If found, trust Emma." The words felt impossible. Marcus had never met her before that morning. Yet somehow he had known she would be the one to find the key, the one to follow the coordinates, the one standing inside the hidden room now. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The quiet hum of the flashlight seemed unusually loud inside the underground shelter. Then Rose carefully gathered the files. "We need to take this to the authorities." Emma nodded. This time, there was no hesitation. The evidence was too important. The drive back to town felt longer than usual. Every passing vehicle made Emma glance through the window. Every turn in the road felt significant. By the time they arrived at the sheriff's office, the sun was beginning to sink behind the hills. What happened next moved faster than Emma could have imagined. Investigators reviewed the documents late into the night. State officials arrived the following morning. More records were examined. More evidence surfaced. Within days, the information hidden beneath the cabin began changing everything. Stories that had been ignored were finally heard. Complaints that had disappeared were finally investigated. Workers who had stayed silent out of fear were finally willing to speak. The truth Marcus had protected for months was no longer hidden. It belonged to everyone now. 3 days later, Emma sat on the front porch with Rose when a familiar sound rolled across the countryside. At first it was distant, a low vibration carried by the wind. Then it grew louder and louder. Emma looked toward the road. So did Rose. The sound became impossible to mistake. Motorcycles. Hundreds of them. The rumble spread across the fields like approaching thunder. Neighbors stepped outside. Cars pulled to the shoulder. Curtains shifted throughout town. People gathered along sidewalks as the procession entered Main Street. Riders appeared from every direction. Black motorcycles stretched for blocks. Then miles. Chrome reflected the afternoon sunlight. Engines echoed between buildings. Yet something unexpected happened. No one shouted. No one caused trouble. The riders moved calmly through town with remarkable discipline. Some carried supplies. Others carried boxes. Several trucks followed behind them loaded with food, tools, and equipment. Emma watched in amazement. She had never seen anything like it. Then she spotted a familiar face. Marcus Steele rode near the front of the procession. He looked stronger now, healthier. The exhaustion that had marked his face in the forest had faded. When he saw Emma standing on the porch, he raised one hand in greeting. A few minutes later, the motorcycles gathered at the town square. Curious residents followed. Local reporters arrived. Community leaders arrived. Investigators spoke publicly about the evidence uncovered from the cabin. The facts were presented openly. Questions were answered. Most importantly, help was organized for the workers and families affected by the situation Marcus had exposed. What surprised the town most was the role the bikers played. They were not there to intimidate anyone. They volunteered. They unloaded supplies. They repaired homes. They delivered groceries. They helped elderly residents carry furniture. They worked alongside local volunteers from sunrise until evening. For decades, many people had judged them from a distance. Now, those same people watched them serve complete strangers without asking for recognition. Emma noticed expressions changing all around her. Fear slowly gave way to curiosity. Curiosity gave way to respect. Near sunset, Marcus stood beside the temporary aid center as hundreds of riders continued helping throughout town. He looked across the crowd and found Emma again. For a moment, he simply smiled. Then he walked toward her. As the golden light settled across Main Street, Emma realized something remarkable. The truth hidden beneath that abandoned cabin had not only changed lives. It had changed how an entire town saw the people they thought they already understood. 1 month later, the first cool breeze of autumn drifted across the Carter farm, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and freshly cut hay. Life had slowly returned to normal, at least as normal as it could after everything that had happened. The town had changed. People smiled more easily. Neighbors who once barely spoke now stopped to help one another. The workers who had finally received support were rebuilding their lives. And whenever people told the story of how the truth came to light, one name always found its way into the conversation. Emma Carter. On that particular Saturday morning, Emma sat on the front porch sketching pine trees in a notebook while Rose watered flowers along the walkway. The sky was clear and bright, painted a deep blue that seemed to stretch forever. It was the kind of peaceful day that made the world feel safe again. Then a familiar sound rolled across the countryside. Emma looked up immediately. A smile spread across her face before she even saw who it was. The low rumble of a motorcycle approached from the road. Moments later, Marcus Steele pulled into the driveway. His black motorcycle gleamed beneath the sunlight. Unlike their first meeting, there was no fear in his eyes now. No exhaustion. No uncertainty. He looked stronger than ever. Emma jumped to her feet and ran toward him. Marcus climbed off the bike and removed his helmet. "Good morning, kid. You came back," Emma said. Marcus smiled. "I told you I would." Rose walked over from the garden and greeted him warmly. The friendship that had grown between them over the past month felt natural now. Marcus reached into one of the motorcycle saddlebags and carefully pulled out a small wrapped box. "This is for you." Emma's eyes widened. "For me? Go ahead." She opened the package slowly. Inside was a beautiful blue bicycle with a silver bell mounted on the handlebars. Her mouth fell open. "No way." Marcus laughed. "I figured every explorer needs reliable transportation." Emma immediately wrapped her arms around him. The giant biker froze for a second before returning the hug. Rose smiled as she watched. There was something remarkable about seeing a man who looked so intimidating become completely defenseless in the presence of a grateful child. But Marcus was not finished. He reached into his vest pocket and removed a second envelope. This one he handed to Rose. She opened it carefully and gasped. Inside was a letter confirming the creation of an educational scholarship fund in Emma's name. The fund would help pay for future schooling, opportunities, summer programs, and eventually college if she chose to attend. Emma looked from Rose to Marcus in confusion. "What is it?" Rose's eyes glistened with tears. "It means somebody believes in your future, sweetheart." Marcus knelt until he was eye level with her. The movement felt symbolic somehow. The towering biker who had once hung helplessly from a tree now lowered himself to speak with the little girl who had changed everything. Around them, the afternoon sunlight painted long shadows across the yard. "Emma," he said softly, "there is something I want you to remember for the rest of your life." She nodded. Marcus smiled. "Everybody thinks I survived because I was strong." He paused for a moment. "The truth is, I survived because an 8-year-old girl was braver than every adult around her." Emma felt her cheeks grow warm. She looked down at the grass, embarrassed by the compliment. Marcus gently lifted her chin so she would meet his eyes again. "You saw someone who needed help, and you helped. That matters more than you know." Later that evening, as the sun began sinking behind the distant hills, hundreds of motorcycles appeared along the road outside the farm. Riders gathered quietly in a nearby field, not for a celebration of themselves, but to honor the courage of one little girl. Emma stood beside Marcus while the golden light of sunset washed across the landscape. Rows of motorcycles stretched toward the horizon. The engines were silent now. The riders simply stood together, watching the sky turn shades of orange and gold. For a brief moment, the world felt perfectly still. Emma looked at the people around her and realized something important. Courage did not always look the way people expected. Sometimes it wore a leather vest. Sometimes it carried scars. And sometimes it belonged to a little girl carrying a bag of pine cones through the woods. As the final rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the hills, Marcus rested a protective hand on her shoulder. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to, because both understood that the most extraordinary journeys often begin with one simple decision to help someone in need.